Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into a fascinating topic, the demand curve. We'll be exploring how consumer choices influence pricing strategies and forecasting in the market. This journey will give us valuable insights into the dynamics of supply and demand and how they impact business decisions. I'm excited to share this with you, so let's get started. Here, we're looking at what a demand curve really shows. Essentially, it illustrates the relationship between price and quantity demanded over time. When prices go down, demand usually goes up. People tend to buy more because it's more affordable. This curve helps us understand consumer behavior and how price changes influence purchasing decisions. It's important to remember, though, that this reflects trends and choices rather than precise sales forecasts. The image of the grocery store aisle gives a real-world context, showing the variety of products where these demand dynamics come into play every day. Here we see the law of demand illustrated by a downward-sloping demand curve. As the price decreases, the quantity demanded increases, which is a fundamental principle in economics. On the vertical axis, we have the price, and on the horizontal axis, the quantity demanded. The curve clearly shows that at higher prices, consumers purchase less, while at lower prices, they buy more. This negative relationship between price and quantity demanded is crucial for understanding how markets function. It highlights consumer behavior and helps businesses and policymakers anticipate changes in demand based on price fluctuations. Let's talk about the key factors that determine demand. First, consumer income plays a crucial role. When people's income changes, it directly affects how much they're willing and able to buy, which shifts the demand curve accordingly. Next, tastes and preferences can cause demand to increase or decrease. When consumers develop new preferences or lose interest in certain products, the demand curve moves as a result. Another important factor is the prices of related goods. This includes substitutes and complements, where changes in those prices can cause the demand for a product to shift. Lastly, expectations about future prices or income, along with the number of buyers in the market, impact demand levels over time. All these elements work together to shape the overall demand we observe. Here we're looking at two demand curves to understand the difference between movement along the curve and shifts of the curve itself. On the x-axis, we have price in dollars, and on the y-axis, quantity demanded. The initial demand curve shows how quantity demanded changes as price decreases from 100 units at $10 down to 60 units at $2. This pattern represents a movement along the curve caused purely by price changes. Now, the shifted demand curve lies to the right of the initial curve, indicating higher quantity demanded at every price point. For example, at $10, demand increases from 100 to 120 units. This shift reflects changes other than price, like consumer preferences or income, that increase demand overall. So the key takeaway is that movement along the curve happens when price changes affect quantity demanded, while a curve shift means the entire demand relationship has changed due to external factors. Understanding this distinction is crucial for analyzing market behavior accurately. Here we're focusing on the concept of price elasticity of demand, which measures how much the quantity demanded of a product changes in response to price changes. Starting with elastic demand, this occurs when the quantity demanded is highly sensitive to price fluctuations. You often see this with luxury goods or items that aren't essential, where a small price change can lead to a big shift in how much people buy. Moving to inelastic demand. Here, the quantity demanded hardly changes even when prices do. This is typical for essential goods or necessities, where consumers need the product regardless of price shifts. Finally, unit elastic demand represents a balanced situation where the quantity demanded changes proportionally with price changes. Understanding these three types helps businesses and economists predict how consumers will react to pricing strategies. The image beside illustrates a luxury product, tying nicely to the concept of elastic demand. When we talk about what makes demand more or less elastic, there are two key factors to consider. First, the availability of substitutes plays a major role. If there are many close substitutes for a product, demand tends to be more elastic because consumers can easily switch to alternatives if the price goes up. For example, if the price of one brand of coffee increases, people might just buy a different brand instead. The second important factor is the nature of the good itself. Necessities usually have inelastic demand since people need to buy them regardless of price changes. On the other hand, luxuries are more elastic because consumers can choose to forego these items when prices rise. This image of vintage food and beverage tins reminds us how some products become essentials over time, influencing how sensitive consumers are to price shifts. Here, we're looking at how the demand curve impacts total revenue through three key concepts. First, when demand is elastic, lowering the price actually increases total revenue because more customers are willing to buy at the lower price, boosting the overall quantity sold. On the other hand, when demand is inelastic, raising the price increases total revenue since the quantity sold doesn't drop much. People are less sensitive to price changes. Finally, the chart on the right visualizes revenue changes across different price points by showing how total revenue fluctuates based on demand elasticity. This helps us understand the balance between pricing strategies and consumer behavior to optimize revenue. Here we have a comparison between market demand and individual demand. Starting with individual demand, this represents the quantity that a single buyer is willing to purchase at each price point. It's influenced by that buyer's personal preferences and budget constraints, so it shows how much one person values a product or service. On the other hand, market demand aggregates the quantities demanded by all buyers at each price level. By combining everyone's demand, it gives us a comprehensive view that's crucial for setting prices, making forecasts, and planning capacity. Essentially, individual demand focuses on one buyer's behavior, while market demand looks at the bigger picture across the entire market. Understanding both helps businesses tailor their strategies effectively. Here we have some real-world examples that illustrate how demand curves behave differently across various products and services. Starting with gasoline demand, we see that it tends to be inelastic. This is because gasoline is essential for many people, and there simply aren't many alternatives they can switch to in the short term. Moving on to streaming subscriptions, the demand is more elastic. Since there are many competitors and it's often a discretionary expense, consumers can easily switch services or opt out if prices rise. Airline tickets show elastic demand as well because travelers have flexibility. They can choose different dates, airlines, or routes based on price changes. Lastly, seasonal products have highly elastic demand that fluctuates dramatically with time, driven by availability and changing trends. These examples really help us understand how elasticity varies depending on the nature of the product or service. Here we're looking at how businesses leverage demand curves in practical ways. First, they use demand curves for price setting. By analyzing these curves, companies can determine the optimal price points that maximize their revenue, balancing customer willingness to pay with sales volume. Second, demand responses play a crucial role in sales forecasting. Understanding how demand shifts helps businesses estimate future sales more accurately and plan effective promotions accordingly. Together, these strategies enable companies to make informed decisions that drive profitability and market success. Here are the key takeaways from our discussion. The demand curve clearly shows how price and quantity are related. But it's important to remember that demand can shift due to many factors beyond just price. Elasticity plays a crucial role because it tells us how sensitive consumers are to price changes, which in turn affects demand. Understanding these concepts gives businesses valuable insights, helping them make smarter, more informed decisions in the market. Now, I'd be happy to take any questions or hear your thoughts.